Hello and welcome back to Aspen Talks Health. I am Dr. Nicola, and today we are talking about CBD and enhancing your performance. CBD can also be used for anxiety and inflammation and helping you with stress. So we're going to learn all about that today thanks to Don McLaughlin. He is here. He is the founder and CEO of Pure Power Botanicals, and the author of Plant Performance and Endocannabinoid System, a wonderful new book that he's just come out with.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome. I'm very
delighted to
happy
be here in Aspen. It means a lot to me, Aspen does, so it's such a pleasure being here.
Yeah, you're just over the hill in Steamboat.
That's right. That's right.
Nice. Good. Well, welcome. So you have an awesome story. Please tell us about it.
Well, my story around CBD starts in 2012 when, in the midst of serving as founder and CEO of a business that I ran for 10 years in the Fortune 500, I hit rock bottom hard after years and years of just chronic stress and at times severe anxiety and depression. And ultimately, I think my body just gave out, and I was in a tough spot, and I knew that. And the business was kind of sliding sideways because I was sliding sideways, and I set out on a new course to care for my mind and body in ways that I had been ignoring for so very long. And it really started not with CBD, it started with 100% self-acceptance and self-love. I think I'd been holding on to so much around my identity as an entrepreneur with this, from the outside, very successful business and successful life. But on the inside, I was really struggling, and because I was not caring for myself. And that led me down a journey over a number of months to overhaul my diet, begin regular exercise, and in the midst of that, discovering hemp-derived CBD.
Yeah. Before we get to the CBD, we had talked, we're good friends, and so you were defined by achievement.
I was 100%. I think that I kind of, hook, line, and sinker on the American dream in many respects, and the pursuit of achievement really defined me for so long as a lawyer early in my legal career, and then as an entrepreneur. That was my identity. And when it was threatened, it was very unsettling, and it also just sort of the bottom fell out, if you will.
Right.
And I had to reclaim myself, and I did that through reclaiming my health.
Yeah, I just talked about this on another show with another guest, that to want to achieve things in life is wonderful, but to have a sense of worthiness and love, self-love and acceptance without it, and on your journey to it, is the key. It's if you can't love yourself without it, is the issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think for me, it took falling that far, and hitting that hard to realize that. And I will say that cannabis generally, and specifically hemp-derived CBD, has helped me reconnect with myself and certainly enhance my health and well-being in ways that have now led to much greater levels of performance than I ever experienced in my life, both professionally, personally, and then athletically, in ways that I never even imagined. In my mid-40s, becoming a 100-mile ultra-endurance trail runner.
Amazing.
So there's a lot to my story, and yet it really starts with this from the ground level, separating who I am from what I do,
right,
and recognizing that it's so important to just care for my health first and foremost, and that's where it all started.
Nice.
And my journey to cannabis is a very surprising one, because I started my legal career as an assistant DA, prosecuting drug crimes, and always viewing cannabis in that way. And yet, in the aftermath of hitting bottom in 2012, I started to read articles in the Denver Post and other national publications about the increasing study of the therapeutic or medicinal uses of cannabis. And just to be clear, cannabis breaks down in two ways. There's marijuana, which most people know that's what gets you high, and then there's hemp. They're both from the same plant genus, but they're different entirely. And so I read these articles and it opened my eyes in a big way because they referred to athletes taking this thing called CBD for anxiety, for sleep, for energy. And at the time, I was hooked on, for years, prescription antidepressants. And I had a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I asked my doctor about what I'd been learning in these articles. And I didn't really get much support, understandably. And I just had to self-experiment. And that's what I did over the course of months and now years. And it's really radically transformed my life.
Wow. So to make sure everyone understands, the THC is addictive. It can be. It's psychoactive.
Correct.
And that's what gets you high. Versus the CBD, there's no addiction. Correct.
That's right. That's right.
And because it's not
binding to the receptors in the way that THC does, or opiates, for example, they bind to receptors.
Okay.
CBD is just not that way. It influences receptors in this endocannabinoid system. And what is that? It was only discovered in the early 1990s in connection with the study of how marijuana was impacting the body. And lo and behold, what was discovered are these receptors all throughout our body that are called cannabinoid receptors, and they regulate cellular activity. And so the CBD is distinctively different than THC in the way it influences and interacts with these receptors. So yeah, it's non-habit forming. The World Health Organization came out with a report that unemphatically stated that. The FDA recently did in March of 2018 in an opinion letter to the DEA. So it's clear that CBD is not addictive, non-habit forming, very safe profile. It's really, from my perspective, it's a superfood. You know, it's just one of these nutrients that has these cannabinoids that interact with these receptors all throughout the body, and in particular, they're highly concentrated in the gut. And I'll just say, from my experience, the first thing I noticed was that my stress and anxiety was much more manageable, much more manageable. And now I know, in doing the research for the book that just came out, that there's a specific reason for that, because CBD, and to be clear, CBD is just one of 100 plus cannabinoids that are derived from hemp. And what they do is they downregulate our stress response, right? That fight or flight where cortisol spikes, that's connected with the link between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenals. So when you're in fight or flight, that HPA, as it's known, HPA axis is active.
Right.
And so when you're under stress, the HPA axis is constantly dealing with that stress response, if you will.
Right.
And that's where we get adrenal fatigue, is if we're constantly, and I was, for sure, that certainly led to my burnout. And for whatever reason, CBD downregulates that HPA axis in a way that we're not constantly having that stress response.
Interesting. So you feel just overall calmer?
Much calmer, much calmer. Situations that made me anxious previously, it was much easier to deal with, and ultimately just weaned myself off of antidepressants. And I found that I was just much more present. Just much more present because I wasn't so worked up. So with my team, with clients, I was just more present with them. That's the first thing that I noticed. The second thing is I just started to sleep a lot better. I had been having a lot of trouble sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, not falling back to sleep. And the reason for that medically, scientifically, is because I was fight or flight. I had this, sort of chronic stress response.
Right.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so since CBD downregulates that response, and also cortisol levels stay lower, I was sleeping better.
You can produce more melatonin. So it's when your cortisols are too high, you don't produce as much melatonin.
Correct.
You can't drop in.
Exactly. And with respect to anxiety, I'd been taking antidepressants, which are, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs.
Yeah.
And there are studies now showing that CBD is more effective than SSRIs in preventing the degradation of serotonin production. That's really what's happening with CBD. It's not boosting serotonin as much as it's diminishing the reduction of serotonin production.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that really helped with anxiety, and then if I'm sleeping better, I immediately started to have much better energy, consistently more energy. I'd been hooked on caffeine, really, at the coffee pot constantly all day.
An attorney.
Exactly. In the world of the Fortune 500, very stressful situations. Everything was, urgent, and time is of the essence. It's very stressful, and yet I, all of a sudden had this newfound energy, and that led to, this all of a sudden discovery of ultra endurance trail running. And that was a shock to me because I got kicked off my high school cross country team. I was such a bad, disinterested runner. And the fact that all of a sudden I just, literally in the span of 2 years went up to the 50-mile distance without any training whatsoever, it was really this change in diet and energy that I had.
Yeah, excellent. Good. Yeah, change of diet was also important. I know
huge.
you make wonderful smoothies in the morning.
Very important component.
Yeah.
And I think we've been conditioned culturally, just the pill culture. Give me the pill. Right. When that's not been my experience. CBD and other cannabinoids are very, very helpful for sure. And yet, if you continue doing what you've always done in terms of a poor diet, you're just going to offset the positive effects you'd otherwise get. And the other corollary to that is I would say that CBD really helped me stick with improving my diet. It just seemed like I had more connection with myself, that it was easier to make decisions about what to put in my body in the way of food and drink. And so my addiction to alcohol just literally went away because I started to separate myself from those things that didn't make me feel good.
Yeah. Right, smart.
So it just had this magical ability to make me feel better in ways that it was easier to make good decisions.
Right.
And I was just listening to a talk by a Harvard psychiatrist who talked about the fact that when we're in stress, we just return to habit hell. We just default to those habits that particularly are unhelpful.
Yeah.
And so this explains my experience with new habits that I started incorporating into my life.
Love it. And the lower stress.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It all kind of fed into each other.
Exactly.
Beautiful. The inflammation, is that because you have less stress? Is that why there's less inflammation?
That's an influence for sure. Part of the inflammation story with CBDs is that it is such a powerful antioxidant.
Ah.
And so oxidative stress and inflammation are hand in glove. And so the powerful antioxidant properties that the U.S. government has recognized in CBD and other cannabinoids is a big factor in taming inflammation. And, to be clear, it's not the sort of, if you break your arm, CBD is not the go-to in an acute situation like that.
Right.
In my experience, and I think reading the literature, it's for chronic inflammation, which, unfortunately, in modern society, it is tied to the leading causes of death, bar none. It's the most common denominator.
Yeah.
Chronic systemic inflammation.
Yeah.
And CBD and cannabinoids just have a role to play in taming inflammation.
Yeah. Diabetics suffer from inflammation because of the high blood sugars. And also I've been learning about adverse childhood experiences and how they lead to chronic stress because you don't know when a parent might be explosive.
Yes.
And so it kind of led to a chronic level of stress. And I've found over the years that I ended up taking THC, but I wonder if there's also some CBD kind of
depending on strain. In marijuana, there's two primary strains, right? Sativa and indica.
Yeah.
Sativa has very low CBD. but indica has a fair amount of CBD, and that's why indica is often recommended for relaxing,
calming.
and CBD is a huge influence in that equation because there's higher dosage, there's higher volume of CBD in indica strain. Now hemp just is off the charts in terms of CBD content because it's so much higher.
Just the seeds?
No, the leaves in the flower.
So if I have hemp seeds, I'm not getting any CBD?
No.
Interesting.
What you are getting, though, which makes it a very special plant, is it is so high in omega-3s.
Yeah. Good. How is it helping with the recovery? Is that?
Yeah, the recovery is really, the recovery is, and you'll read this in national news outlets now. There's so much attention around CBD now.
Yeah.
It's turning into a bit of hype, and it sounds like snake oil. But the reality is there are some studies, even though a lot of people say there's really not been a lot of study. There's been a fair amount of study outside of the U.S. in countries like Spain, Brazil. Brazil's done a lot of study. Israel. But here in the U.S., 2016 study at the University of Kentucky with mice showed that their inflammation just simply went down. And so you pair that with anecdotal stories, which we included in the book, Plants, Performance in the Endocannabinoid System, 21st Century Sports Medicine. We focused on athletes because they tend to know their bodies pretty well. And there's just one story after the next. Former NFL player, extreme pro skier, ultra trail runner. They're all saying the same thing. It absolutely helps with inflammation, and not just in joints, but in the brain as well. And that's why my co-founder and cousin Sean McCabe, a co-founder at Pure Power, he suffered a near fatal head injury 3 years ago. And about 3 months into his recovery, I recommended CBD to him based on some articles I'd started to research about inflammation in the brain, which is obviously the major problem with head injuries.
Right.
And he hasn't stopped since.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's back. I mean, he literally was in ICU for 2 weeks and then a year recovery. Couldn't even ride a bike. And now he is back playing competitive hockey. He played collegiate level hockey, and he's back.
Full coherence. Fantastic.
Yeah. So there's something really magical there for sure.
It's safe to use.
Totally safe to use, and that's been again. I mentioned the World Health Organization. They issued a report on CBD. Very, very safe profile. The FDA has recently done the same thing in their 2018 letter to the DEA. And the reason the FDA did that, they had to. And the reason they had to is because the FDA has just approved the first ever cannabis-derived drug for seizures.
Yeah.
And in so doing, they had to do that because CBD and hemp, amazingly, was treated as a Controlled 1 substance on the same level as heroin up until 2.5 weeks ago when President Trump signed the 2018 Farm Bill that completely removes CBD as a controlled substance and makes it legal federally. And hemp and all its derivatives, which obviously CBD is the most widely known one because of all the positive therapeutic experiences that people have been having, not just in the U.S. If you look at Google, news alerts, this is around the world. There's huge demand in Brazil, the UK, the number of registrants with the UK government for CBD to have a permit to get it, they just keep tripling by the quarter. And it's only been, the last year and a half.
Interesting,
Yeah.
huh?
So it's a global phenomenon. And the reason is because we all, with a central nervous system, we all have an endocannabinoid system, and so do animals. That's why so many people are giving CBD to their pets. They, too, have an endocannabinoid system.
Thank you for saying that. My mother's dog, a little sweet little poodle, started having seizures. And for a month now, she's given him CBD, hasn't had another one.
There you go. And I don't know the science specifically around seizures, except that it clearly works, right? And the FDA has just approved the first drug, and now state by states, physicians will be able to prescribe this cannabis-derived drug.
Yeah. I wonder if it's part of calming the nervous system.
You'd think there's some connection there.
Yeah. And the anti-inflammatory if that seizure is caused by some inflammation in the brain.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So it's officially legal.
100%.
100%
no
legal.
questions asked.
Anywhere in the
Yes, anywhere in the U.S.
I heard that Walmart's going to start selling it.
Yes, the big players are likely, which is humbling, given that I've gone out of the Fortune 500 and gone into something that's been near and dear to my heart for 25 years, and that is health and wellness. In founding Pure Power Botanicals, and we're a small startup. And there are going to be big players. There's no question. And I think that within a relatively short time, you're going to go into Whole Foods and say, where are your ECS or endocannabinoid support products?
Huh. But now, okay, obviously, there's a concern with quality.
Absolutely.
So tell us the difference between oil and water-based.
Yes. So there are kind of every Tom, Dick, and Harry is getting into the CBD business because it is the raging ingredient in the supplement world right now. And we spent months and months talking to lots of different farmers and suppliers of hemp, and there are big differences in the quality of the grow, the seeds, how they're actually cultivated. And in particular, there's a lot of oils out there that increasingly it's just higher and higher dosages of CBD. What used to be 50 milligrams is now 300, and now it's 1,500 and 3,000. And part of the problem with that, in our view, is that you just have to take more and more. And the reason for that is that oil is hard for the body to digest, and hemp oil in particular is very fatty. And as a result, it's got to go through the GI tract. And in that process, this is well known in the supplement space, a huge percentage of the nutrients are lost. And so you see certain brands, and we're one of them, that has applied technology to make it much more available to the body. Increased bioavailability or assimilation, so the cannabinoids are able to go into the body much more quickly. And the way that's done in our product is using what's called liposomes, which is essentially it's a fatty wrapper essentially around the cannabinoids in a way that allows them to permeate the blood barrier almost immediately. And that's critically important because when you take this, you want to know that you're getting the nutrients and it's not being lost through elimination.
Yeah. So is it dissolving in your mouth, or is it still...
Combination of the mouth. So we definitely, and we see with other brands that go this route with a water-soluble solution, is to let it sit in the mouth for a little bit to begin that process. And then as it goes down into the stomach, part of it is just the liposome also protects against acidic breakdown. So it's essentially almost protecting, so it doesn't get broken down. And instead, it just literally starts to get assimilated right through the lining of the stomach.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. And the other distinction I'll make is that there's a lot of CBD products out there that are just CBD, meaning the original hemp oil has been so processed down that they've eliminated all other cannabinoids and just isolated on CBD. And that's totally different. That's known as isolate. That's different from what's referred to in the industry as full spectrum, which means you're getting the full spectrum of all the cannabinoids in the hemp oil. And there have been several studies now that show that isolate, just CBD, is not nearly as effective as the full spectrum of all the phytocannabinoids. Phyto meaning they come from plants, in this case hemp. The reason for that is that scientists are pointing to this interaction and synergy between the different cannabinoids that has greater impact than just the one cannabinoid of CBD.
You perfectly segmented into why I don't believe in supplements, because you can't just take vitamin C or iron. They need the two of them together to be processed in your system.
That's exactly right.
Or magnesium and potassium and calcium.
That's right.
So for us to just isolate one, it's not how nature intended it.
No, we don't work well in parts.
No.
Right? We're holistic systems.
We're whole.
The planet is a holistic system.
Correct.
And that's why we worked with an herbalist who's been one for 30 years, who's totally holistic, and we brought together the right combinations of botanicals and minerals, some of which we just simply don't have in our food like we did 30 and 40 years ago. Basic things like magnesium. Right, vitamin D deficiency is pretty prevalent. And the combination of the plants with the minerals is really where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And with our product line at Pure Power, we're very much focused on that it's the whole and not the part, as we're talking about, but that hemp for eons in Chinese medicine is known as a sort of carrier, a real catalyst. When introduced in the body with other botanicals at the same time, channels are opened up to those other botanicals that wouldn't otherwise be in the absence of hemp. And that's really the heart of Pure Power in our product line. It's not to just keep taking higher dosages of CBD, but instead use Mother Nature's medicine in the form of plants that work really well together. That's much better than an isolated part.
Yeah, I like that you have herbal botanicals and herbs.
Yes.
That support. I know you have one product for energy, one for sleep, one for recovery.
Yes.
And it's the CBD that enhances those herbs.
Exactly.
So it's almost more about the herbs than...
Absolutely it is. And that's why you'll see our products, those formulated products, the energy product Power Up, the sleep product Power Down, the recovery product Reboot, relatively low dosages of CBD. And it's intentional because it's only there as a catalyst. Now that's not to ignore that we need cannabinoids to activate and feed our endocannabinoid system. Why? Because science is showing that these receptors, they degrade and they go fallow. And so our foundational product, Daily Boost, is the liquid hemp extract that's delivered liposomal. And that's really intended to fuel the endocannabinoid system in a way that it's really sort of charged up and ready for these more targeted formulations that deal with things like energy, sleep, and recovery.
Nice. Excellent. So, homework time.
Yes.
Do you have some, we talked about this on the phone. Do you have some homework for
Yes, for sure. As I said earlier, to believe you're just going to pop some pills and CBD is going to be the magic, it's just not the case. It can certainly do these amazing things inside the body. Enhancement. But the sort of magic happens when paired with habits, practices. And so a couple that I'll recommend, just checking in with your body on a more regular basis. How am I feeling physically, mentally, emotionally? And that, I think, certainly when taking something like hemp-derived CBD, that helps because you'll see where it's working. Part of that is just practicing mindful breathing and eating. And frankly, sleeping. I think that we're in such a hyperactive world. It's so easy to overlook the basics of our breath, enjoying our food, being conscious of what we're eating and how we're eating, and then sleeping, right? Really protecting our sleep. So that's some homework. I would encourage people to do just that. There are other things that we talk a lot about at Pure Power because it's as much about the practices and habits as it is about the plant medicine.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Donnie. I'm so grateful that you're on my show.
Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure, and I look forward to coming back.
I'd love that. Wonderful. All right, you guys. Well, as always, check out aspentalkshealth.com. I'll put up Donnie's information, and you can find his products there and his book.
Yes.
Make sure to check that out as well.
Yes, that's on Amazon. And you can find us on social media at Pure Power Life, and our website is livepurepower.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys.